Good morning. Hi, John.
Hi.
Can you hear me?
I can indeed.
Oh my gosh, this is so exciting. Wow. Well, we're finally on the radio together. This is a first. I think we've never done this before, have we?
No, I don't think so. We've done a lot of other stuff, but this is definitely a first. I think I've been waiting for this for, what did we say? We knew each other 48 years? Well, probably not 48 years, but maybe 20. When did you start doing this?
Let's see. We started doing our show maybe 4 years ago.
Oh, well, it's only 4 years then.
Yeah.
Life is full of exaggerations.
I love it. Yeah. I think that's very much the mode of the day is exaggeration. But we're not going to exaggerate because we don't have to.
No.
Because we have great stories to tell.
They're all true.
And they're all true, yes. So this is Kristina Stykos talking to you on the radio. You're listening to 11th Hour Radio on WFVR 96.5 South Royalton. And I'm sure that some of you know that usually Emily Howe is with me on Friday mornings, and she's at the Tunbridge Fair today. I think last year we tried to broadcast our show from the fair, and it was a horrible flop. And so this year I said to Todd, I don't really want to try that again. For some reason, it just didn't translate for us to be doing our show next to the corn roast. I don't know. But anyway, so this is our alternative. While Emily's up there, what is she doing? She participates in an exhibit in the Antique House in which they cook food all day on a hearth, an open fire. And so you get to watch them bake and make roast chickens and stuff like that. And she's dressed up in her colonial clothing. So we'll get to see her later. But in the meantime, I have my friend John Daitch here. Welcome, John.
Thank you. Nice to be here. Guess that's what you say when you're on the radio.
Yeah, you can. Well,
thank you, Chris. It's really nice to be here.
Well, this radio show, as you will quickly find out, is pretty much exactly however we make it, and anything goes. The only thing you can't do on this show is you can't swear.
Well, I used to do that all the time.
Yeah.
I thought I'm lost now.
I know. You're going to have to just, lay back on the bad language and...
no, it's not bad language. It's good language.
It is good. It's expressive language.
Yes.
Yeah, you just have to be creative and think of something that approximates what you really meant to say.
Darn.
Yeah. Dang it. What? Yeah. So, so John actually was my junior high school principal. So that dates us back. I was 12, I think.
I was 29 the first year I took that job.
You were 29. That seems like a baby to me now.
I was pretty much a baby, in fact.
How did you think of yourself taking on the helm of a school at age 29?
Well, interesting question. No one ever asked that before. You get kind of arrogant. It's unavoidable. When you're 29 years old, you're already arrogant. And when somebody throws you a school like Markles, which was unique in the United States, and the beginning of the alternative school movement, and connected with Cornell University, my parents were more impressed with the fact that it was a Cornell associated activity than anything I was actually doing. That goes to your head.
But you have to have a certain measure of confidence to do something like that.
Well, I had absolutely no hesitation whatsoever as regards the pedagogical philosophy and the activities that we were going to do. I knew exactly what I wanted to do, and the people who were there shared the dream, if you will, shared the idea. Well, it's ideology. That's got a bad term these days because we're functioning on ideology and it's not working very well. But a sense that what we were doing with young people, and that included us. I was a young person. I wasn't a junior high school kid, but I wasn't far out of it. What we were doing was working together to build something positive, something good. That was the spirit of the 60s anyway. Those were the good old days.
Yeah, we can easily say that now. I mean, we have some contrast.
Yeah. So so I had a lot of confidence, and so did everybody else around me. All of us did.
I think
you did.
I did. I had confidence that something great was going to happen to me, and it did.
Yeah.
So, what could you sort of capsulize what your dream was for education at that point?
Well, it was a mixture. It was a response. Partly it was a response to my own experience in school, which I found for the most part unpleasant, and to what I had learned about the way humans function and the way people learn and the way we interact in a way which is positive. So, and I think for all of us, our engagement in the world is, I don't know if I can use the term motivated, but certainly is fed by our early psychological experiences. We go certain places for certain reasons. So partly I was getting revenge on what for me was a total waste of my youth. And I think it's true for most kids, in spite of the fact that they succeed in school and whatnot, that school was boring, it was irrelevant, it did not address my own personal needs, desires, interests. And so for me, the first thing was that kids had to like school. And I don't mean like as in, oh boy, we're going to get a prize today, or oh boy, what's on the lunch menu, but like in the sense that it resonates with them and with who they are, and that there is that kids, young people, it's not just that they're learning something interesting, but they're participating in the development of a project, of a community, of who they are, and that they're on an equal level with everybody else in the school. This is not a...
Right, that was an important part of it.
The power sharing was critical.
Yeah, I remember we used to have these all-school meetings once a week, I think on Wednesdays, right? And we'd all get stuffed into this room together.
Yeah.
And the staff and the principal and the kids, everybody was equal, had an equal voice, and some people went on and on and on. but we all had the,
Yep.
invitation to do that until we got cut off by somebody else, right? I mean, it was sort of a democracy.
Yeah, it was a democracy. The only time I ever saw anything that resembled that was when I went to Madagascar for 2 periods of 2 weeks to work with the educational people there. And there were a lot of non-professionals in the room at the time. We were developing curriculum. And their way of functioning was that everybody, no matter who it is, gets to speak if they want. And nothing is moved on. No decision is taken that is not unanimous. So you have 20 people in the room, and they're all talking, and half the time they were talking in a language which I didn't understand. But at the end of not much time, maybe half an hour, you arrived at a consensus.
Wow. So
it was fabulous.
They get used to sort of trusting each other to a certain extent, where if you were kind of on the other side, you could eventually be swayed one way or the other.
Sure. And the idea that we're all in this together, and we have an interest to achieve a consensus, and that compromise is not considered abandoning your principles, but acknowledging the principles of someone else and accepting that.
Yeah. And, Vermont has a town meeting tradition, and that's a very similar process.
Yes.
Can sometimes, though, get contentious. But I still think that doing it is a great exercise for everybody. Absolutely. To just, refamiliarize themselves with the rest of the people in the town and so on.
It's very, very powerful, and you'd say about how people would go on and on. I remember that over the period of the first year, the quality of the all-school meeting changed, because at first everybody wanted to speak and wanted their way to happen, and it was kind of crazy.
Yeah.
And you just went through it until people began to realize, well, I don't have to speak, and if it's not exactly the way I want it, it's pretty good anyway.
Yeah, and there was probably some amount of posturing at first, so yes. Before people really got to know each other, and once you became friends with people, and really friends across the aisle, because one interesting aspect of this school is that kids came from very different backgrounds. It pulled together kids who were having, who were total disaster in the public school system, as well as kids who were functioning well, but just hated it.
Bored stiff.
Yeah.
A number of kids who were there who were bored by the regular school.
Exactly.
I've really felt for those kids.
I know. Yeah. As I was putting together some notes for this, I wrote down the question, what did I learn from Markles? It's kind of a big generalized question, but the first thing that popped into my head is that life is an experiment. And I realize that I say that to people when they come into my recording studio. I often will say, this is an experiment. We don't know if we're going to fail or if we're going to have success, but it's the process that engages us, and it's the processes where a lot of the learning happens.
And you won't learn anything unless you make some mistakes.
That's right. And it's more about following your passion. Yes. And problem solving, because learning how to problem solve is what, that's such an important part of life.
Mary Renee loves to tell a story. A few years ago when we were visiting, we went out to Ithaca and we went to the Trumansburg, the Bluegrass Festival.
Oh, Grassroots Festival.
Yeah, Grassroots Festival. Yeah. And Richie Stearns was playing out there. So
former Markles student.
Former Markles, yes.
Alumni, I guess we call.
I'm not sure I'd use the word student.
Yeah.
Alumni, yeah. And he was out there playing, so we just sort of snuck up to the front of the group and we were watching him play, and then he recognized that I was there. And he said something which Mary Renee loves to quote. She quotes it all the time. She said, there's Dr. Daitch. He's the guy who taught me how to learn.
Ooh, that's nice.
Yeah, it's pretty, and I think that's that's what schools should do. It should teach us how to learn. It doesn't have to teach us stuff. We can learn stuff.
Yeah, it's how to learn.
It's how to learn that stuff.
And what is, as they say, your takeaway from Markles? I mean, if you look back on it from so many years now, what did you learn?
Well, it's very difficult because as I look back, I look back on the mistakes that I made as a person, as an administrator. and there were many. And so I have a certain number of regrets on that level. On the other hand, we talked about this last night. It's like the first time you make love. Nobody can lie to you about it after that. Nobody can tell you that, you're I have to watch out what I'm going to say now because I get myself in trouble. But, nobody can say that, your nose is going to turn red or something bad is going to happen to you. You've just had that experience, and that gives you a certain confidence. But it also lets you realize how many other lies are being told to you about the world around you. And so I used to say, when people would say to me, well, no, that won't work, and I would say, well, you're wrong. It does work. I know it works because we did it.
Yeah.
Now, we only did it for 2 years because the powers that be were very, very vindictive.
Right, because, of course, this was a public school experiment.
Yes. And you kids were having, and we were said this directly, you kids were having too much fun.
Yeah.
People did not like that kids were having fun in school. God, incredible, the forces, the evil forces in the world.
Well,
I took away from that both a feeling of not personal failure, because on the pedagogical level, on the level of working with kids, it was a total success. Mm-hmm. Everything we did worked.
Yeah. Yeah.
You just have to have faith that people are going to do it, and whether they're 12-year-old pre-adolescents or 30 or 40-year-old, whoever they are, teachers, assistants, secretaries, God knows what, you just have faith in each other, and you can do amazing things.
Yeah, I think it just looked really scary from the outside to people who weren't involved with it. It looks just weird, and
well, it was pretty weird,
it had its weird. Well, here's something weird: is that, of course, they discovered many years later that the building itself was sitting on a toxic waste dump. So I ponder on that. I mean, the whole thing eventually, I don't know if it was a Superfund site. It probably wasn't big enough to be a Superfund site, but they dug it all out, and they tore down the building.
I wrote a few letters to the editor suggesting that it should be preserved, even if you can't go near it, with a big sign, because this was a part of our industrial heritage. It was not a pleasant part, but it was a part of it.
Right, it was the old gas company,
yes,
right? But the building, I remember back to the building, and it just seemed like a cozy house. I don't know, how did we do that with a former gas building?
Well, it was, first of all, you kids were always drawing on the walls, so that yeah. helped out a lot. And it was inhabited from about 6 in the morning until 8 or 9 at night. It was impossible. No matter what time I would get to work in the morning, some kid was already there doing something up in one of the rooms upstairs. And when I was ready to go home, whatever it was, whether it was at 6 o'clock or 8 o'clock, I had to drive people out.
Yeah, people wanted to stay.
Yeah.
They were busy.
So there was the human presence, and not an institutional presence. I mean, you weren't all sitting in classrooms at your desks taking notes.
No.
There was a lot of running around, a lot of going around.
Well, you didn't have to go to class, right? I mean, small point that I bring up, but
you didn't. Look, you didn't even have to come to school. We saved a couple of kids who just couldn't handle any kind of institutional presence. And the number of days that Steve and Dave were, quote unquote, in school when in fact they were out fishing or riding their motorcycles up and down the hills. And that happened for the first several months until they began to realize that there was something going on here.
That they didn't want to miss out on. Yeah, there was a lot of fun stuff going on.
So they began to show up. But it's true, you didn't have to go to class, but why would you not go to a class which you chose to give or which you participated in developing, and where your absence would be noticed not by the truant officer, but would be noticed by the fact that you weren't there and we needed you there to help make the thing work.
Right. Yeah. It was a great sense of...
There was no reason not to go to school.
That's right. You really felt like you belonged to your classes.
Yeah.
You know, and then
they belong to you.
Yeah, definitely. I'm sorry, I'm just looking behind me because I have to just.
You need to do. In fact, you've gone past your 20 minutes.
Well, that's okay. The good thing about the way that we run this show is that we do not run it on clockwork.
So this is what you took away from Markles.
Yeah.
How to run a radio show, sort of.
You know, it definitely gave me permission to do things my way and not be scared off by having to stick to a particular format. And granted, you can't do that everywhere. You can, I mean, Royalton Community Radio embraces what we're doing. At least they do now, and they have been for 4 years or so. That could change tomorrow. They could say, "Oh, it's just too free form. It doesn't fit what we're doing." And honestly, my attitude would just be, "Well, fine. We'll find another place to do it. Yeah. No hard feelings. You know, you just have to stick to what you
there are places for that. I mean, you don't want people who are building bridges to sort of do it with a cup of coffee and just sort of kind of guess whether 2 and 2 makes 5 or 6.
That's a good point. Yeah,
but that's not. You know, most of life is not like that.
Yeah.
And if you're awake and conscious of what's going on, you recognize when it is like that and when it isn't. And when it is like that, when you do have to be precise and you have to know your math and you have to write a sentence that makes sense to somebody else, you can do it because you've learned those skills. Those skills are relatively easy to learn.
Yes, and oddly enough, I am a perfectionist. So
yeah,
it's an interesting contrast between wanting a lot of freedom, but also when I get down to it, to being very detailed about what I do.
Yeah.
So anyway, okay, we've got a track of music. It's called Old Dirt Road. I always have trouble queuing up my iPad for some reason, but I'm gonna.
How does anybody let you in a recording studio?
I don't know.
Radio studio,
I don't
Chris?
know. I have this ongoing battle with the iPad, but we're gonna see if we can surmount it. So here we go. Old Dirt Road.
When I stand under October skies, chilly winds caress my wrinkled eyes. That old north wind begins to blow, my footsteps down some old dirt road. I feel November's stinging rain. It soaked my heart with memory's pain. Some hollow deep inside my soul lead me down an old dirt road. These autumn trees before me blaze, cannot help but be amazed. What this world to me has shown, as I stare down some old dirt road. When my wife beside me stands, her tender skin on my calloused hands, our life of love, its stories told, love walks down an old dirt road. When I work no more in blazing sun, spring sweet rivers I no longer run, western skies will ease my load, lead me home on an old.
That was Doug Anderson, a.k.a. Moose, and the song was called Old Dirt Road. Hear the train whistle?
Yes.
There's a train. You asked me what goes on in this town. There's a train that comes through the town. It's pretty exciting, and I can see it when it goes by right over there.
I'm not by the door.
Here it comes.
So I can't see.
It's coming. Here it comes.
God.
There it is.
What's incredible is that, that's a sound which is about as American as you can get.
Is it? Do you think of it as...
you don't hear the train. It's like the police sirens. They're different in Europe. That's a train whistle. And in fact, the fact that we actually hear that train whistle today, that's a whistle that we would hear regularly 50 or 60 or 70 years ago. But
right, it's got a kind of timeless quality to it.
Absolutely.
I'm glad you agree with me, because every time the train comes by during our show, I have a moment of silence because I love to listen to it so much.
It's magnificent, and of course it harkens back to to the quote unquote good old days, which were old but not necessarily good. It's part of the myth of the American expansion and the American conquest of time and space and railroad tracks and commerce and all that sort of stuff. But it's really for me it's very, very evocative.
Yes, and of course you live overseas now, and you have for many years. How many years has it been?
Wow, this summer it was 33 years.
Gosh, that's a long time.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was going to ask you a little bit about that. Let's see. Well, before we'll get to that, I wanted to ask you one more question, at least, about our school experience back in this, what was it, the 70s, 69, 70?
Well, the school started a year before I came, and I came in 1969, so it was 68 to 72.
Okay.
Because the last year it existed, I was persona non grata, and then it was transformed into a son of Markles, which was a kind of a watered-down version, but nevertheless did a lot of really good things.
Yes, and got integrated into Ithaca High School. Yeah. So it outlived itself, which is great. But I had some kind of a more personal question. Let me see. Okay, here's the question. It says, do you think that I have changed, or am I basically the same person that I was back then when I was 12?
You're asking me to talk about you?
Yeah. Then we'll talk about you, but...
Well, we don't change. None of us really changes. We just evolve, or aspects come and go. I don't know. I always knew you as someone who was enthusiastic and independent and I can't think of the words, and I don't want to waste our time while everybody's listening to me think.
It's okay. We do that a lot on this show, actually.
But no, I don't think you have changed. You were into music when you were a kid. You had long hair. You had practically the same voice. If I am allowed to say this in contemporary politically correct America, you are always as beautiful as you are now, attractive. No, I don't think so. There's a certain freshness which exists, which was always there.
I just think it's fascinating that, so many years go by, and oftentimes we don't have that perspective if we don't hang on to old friends. And I don't have that many old friends from Ithaca. So it's nice just to check in and get some kind of a perspective on that, because the arc of a life is just such an amazing thing.
Well, I remember the day that you left Ithaca. We were sitting on a bench in Stewart Park, and you said, well, I'm going to, I don't remember where you were going, but you were going somewhere. And you must have been about 17 or 18 at that time. And And in fact, you were going out to the wilds of something. I don't remember where you were going. And I just remember saying to myself, well, Chris is often running into the world at large, and she will live a life, whatever it is, it will not be, quote unquote, normal. And that's true. You have lived a life which is not what we would call normal, in the sense that you've always lived outside of the square, outside of the circle. It's a square in America right now. Unfortunately, it's no longer a circle, if it ever was. And you have always lived outside of that, in the sense that you've not allowed yourself to be sucked in by whatever the commercial imperatives are of our society.
Well, I think that's happening for more and more people now in the United States, is that they're finding that square just doesn't fit anymore, because it's gotten more and more constricting, and just, there's no explanation anymore for accepting the establishment. So I see it in all walks of life, really. All kinds of people are questioning now. So that's good. I feel more at home that way.
I think one other thing needs to be said about that, because we live in a world right now, we live in a society which has become extensively egocentric and individualized. And one of the things that we tried to do, and I think we did very successfully at Markles, was that everybody developed, whoever they were, whatever they were, wanted to, but it was always in the context of community. And whatever you did, you could get into trouble. You couldn't get into trouble for doing anything in Markles unless it hurt the community. Then you could get into trouble.
Yeah.
But otherwise, nobody much cared. Not that nobody much cared. Nobody made a judgment about what you were doing, as long as it was not injurious to others.
Yeah, and I think that's actually, it's a good lesson for kids to be able to act out a little bit and not have a huge reaction, because usually what happens is the authority figures have a huge reaction, and then you're just dealing with the reaction. You're not dealing with actually what the content of what your impulse was to do a certain thing, and what that might be saying about something you're missing in your life, or something you're trying to say that you can't communicate in another way, a more constructive way. You just kind of jump over to the punitive side. And that's so much like American culture is like that, and our prison system is like that. It's just nuts.
Yeah. Well, it's the good or bad syndrome, black and white.
Yeah, there's the good people and the bad people.
Yeah, and good people have no bad about them, and bad people have no good about them.
Yeah, exactly.
So I don't know if I answered your question in a way which makes you feel good about yourself.
Well, that's not exactly why I was asking it, but I was definitely curious, how much similarity there could be over a span of 48 years. Like if you'd say, yeah, that person's pretty much kind of how they were. I mean, you're very much like you were. I think my first impression of you when I came to school back in whenever, 69, was you were warm-hearted. You're loud. I mean, you have to be loud to talk over 80.
You have 100 screaming kids.
Yeah. I think the first year there were 80 kids, and then the second year it went up to 100 and something, right? So that small school building just got jam-packed. I remember there being actual traffic jams of human bodies, and that could be problematic. I remember sort of having to rub up against Kevin Akers.
Oh, I'm sure he loved it.
Yeah, unfortunately he did love it. And, there was certain amounts of intimidation, but that was, in those days, that was kind of how you learned about that stuff.
Yeah.
So, and we all got through it. But, yeah. Well, and also, you were loud, you were warm-hearted, and you were absolutely interested in every single kid, like nobody slipped through the cracks.
Yeah, that's true.
And that is so unusual.
That's funny. Yeah.
And I mean, even if there were kids that might have sort of slipped off your radar, I think you were always making sure that there were other staff members who were tuned into those kids.
I suppose that's true, and that's partly because we had a staff meeting practically every day. In fact, at the beginning, we did meet every afternoon after school was closed. The staff got together, and when I read about schools where staff have to go to meetings once a month, it's just it's absolutely absurd. So it wasn't just me; it was all of us who were concerned about everybody. And
every day.
And every day.
Concerned about it, everybody, every day.
And to a certain extent, I think there were times when we were not, I don't like to use the word manipulating, but somebody who's more objective than I might use that word. When we saw kids getting into trouble or having a difficult time or being unhappy, we attempted to organize things in a way which addressed that problem without being intrusive, without saying, "Oh, you're not feeling good today. Why don't you go up and see the nurse?" That kind of crap.
Right.
Although sometimes you would say, "Hey, what's the matter? Why don't you go? Let's go go talk to somebody or something." Often it was just another staff member who that kid got along with. But that was the other thing. Staff and kids were friends with each other, so everybody in that building had somebody they could turn to.
Yeah, for sure.
And even if it was other kids, that was okay.
Mm-hmm.
It was not like, you have to see an adult if you're not feeling good. If you're bummed out, you just, I don't know.
Yeah, people had a caring attitude about each other.
Absolutely.
So,
Yes, yeah.
So somebody,
there you go.
Yeah, somebody would know what was going on with everybody.
Besides which, legally, I had to know where everybody was, and it wasn't like when you open the door, the kids come in, and then you close the doors, and everybody's in the building. We had no idea.
That's right.
So I spent a lot of time running around. Where's Danny? Where's Steve?
Yeah.
Well, they're not here, and so I had to be in touch with their parents and all this sort of stuff.
Well,
they're up at the lake doing it.
What was your typical day like? Typical. I'm sure.
There were no typical days.
There were no typical days.
I don't remember. It was a lot of keeping track of people, but mostly keeping track of people to keep myself out of trouble.
Yeah,
and keep the school out of trouble.
Yeah, and that's a good way to just stay in communication with everybody.
Yeah.
Of course, I took classes because I was sort of a kid that was. Well, how should I say it? I just wanted to take classes. I didn't really...
Well, there was a group of kids in the school who you knew you could put those kids in any school, in any situation, and they would succeed. There was just... And they would succeed in the sense that you would do what you had to do to get through the institution, whether it was sitting in a classroom and memorizing the history dates or running the Peach Pit Press, which you guys did.
Yeah.
You took advantage of whatever was offered to you. So we didn't worry much about you. I liked working. I liked having something to... You were a good kid, Chris.
Well, I don't know. I just... yeah. It was good for me.
Yeah.
Let's put it that way.
You used your energy otherwise. You developed other skills than because you already had the going to school skills.
Yeah, and some projects did fail, like the snowshoes that we tried to make. That was a big fail.
Yeah.
With Ivel. Yeah, he brought in this steamer we only got as far as steaming the wood. And then we bent it and it broke, and that was it. End of snowshoes making. So I think I didn't really... Woodworking wasn't so much my thing.
Yeah.
All right. Well, usually at this point in the show, we go off in like 10 million random directions. And we've got 2 minutes till our next music break. So I didn't write down a whole lot of random stuff. Just because I haven't seen you in so long, I thought like anything we talk about, it's going to be of substance. So
yeah, well, we started last night with talking about stuff.
Yeah, because you've been working on a book. You were telling me about that, and that is really an amazing project. Why don't you talk about that just a little bit, because it's probably something that not a lot of people have on their radar.
Well, it's a book which deals with contemporary Palestinian theater, which exists. It's very difficult to talk about this because there's not a vocabulary for it. I'm pro-Palestinian already. The ears go up. What the hell is this all about? Are we talking about, is he pro-terrorist, sort of thing? And what does it mean to be pro? I'm very much engaged, as is Mary Renee, my wife, and many, many other people, in supporting the Palestinian cause, that is, ending the Israeli occupation of the Palestinian territories and for the Palestinians to have a state of their own, if that's the solution that has to be, as opposed to a single state solution where everybody lives together. But now we're getting into technicalities. And that one of the ways in which Palestinians resist, and resist very effectively, the Israeli occupation is through culture and through the building of Palestinian society and identity. Not the building, because that implies that it doesn't exist. It exists. It has existed for hundreds of years, but in solidifying it and in giving it an identity which is visible outside of Palestine. And one of the most powerful ways in which they do this is through theater, because theater not only represents a cultural activity as such, but it's also a way for young people to express themselves. You were talking about kids expressing the anger and stuff that they have. One way of kids expressing themselves, learning about themselves, engaging in a community group team activity.
And also just dealing with the conditions that they're living under.
The conditions are incredible, and the miracle is that there hasn't been just a total revolution with hundreds of thousands of people killed, because the conditions under which Palestinians are forced to live, the psychological conditions as much as the economic conditions, would be for us literally intolerable.
Yeah.
Given what we've already experienced ourselves. So, for a number of reasons, my engagement has turned towards producing a book which presents a large part, not all, because it would be virtually impossible to present all of it in one single book. The theaters and the theater groups which exist mostly in the West Bank and East Jerusalem,
and you
Palestinian nature.
You came into this project as a photographer, really, and then it sort of opened up into...
Yes, my first introduction to Palestinian life occurred in 2007 when I was invited by a French friend who was himself involved in an association which supported a Palestinian theater, a cultural center, to go there and do some workshops with young people on photography, because I'm an amateur photographer.
Okay.
And also I brought a bunch of materials and we built a darkroom while I was down there.
Wow.
And that evolved into working with theater groups who came to France on tours, driving the bus and doing some translation from English, which most Palestinians speak, to French, and being a kind of a road manager and groupie and general hanger-on.
I see. So your first foray into that world was going with your French friend to help set up a dark
refugee
room
camp where we set up a dark room and taught kids photography skills. It's amazing. I mean, I feel when I go there, I sort of feel like I'm going home.
Yeah, I'm sure that changed your life.
It did. It did change my life.
Wow, that's great. And now we're gonna
take a musical break.
Gonna take a musical break.
We all cry.
But thanks for explaining that. Again, I will try to get my iPad to behave. All right, let's see. Right, this one is called Digging for Gold.
You got what you need. You got your tricks and tools. Who will you bleed? You got your pick of fools. Some men say. So go west, young girl, and stake your claim. Be his precious pearl and take his name. Before you grow old, digging for gold. Consider the cost, the price of a diamond ring, and how your best years were lost, traded for shiny things. Turned dull, black as your soul, it's what you're afraid of. Back into coal, it's what he was made of. So go west, young girl, and stake your claim. Be his precious pearl and take his name. You're a death wish girl, his trophy game, rendered and sold, and now you've grown old, digging for gold, begging for gold, digging for gold, digging for gold.
All right. You know, on this show, you hear music that you're probably not going to hear anywhere else. I can guarantee that. For at least, I don't know, 60% of it is probably not played in Vermont. And that track was Val McCallum, who plays with the Jackson Browne Band, but he put out a solo album a couple years ago. And that track was called Digging for Gold. I think that's the title track off his album. So, all right.
I just want to add that the book is, I'm actually not writing that book. I've interviewed people and transcribed the interviews and changed it, moving them around so that the book is about the theaters, but in the words of the people who work in them, the actors and directors and actresses and whatnot.
And I hope you find a publisher to publish it in English, because I know the first edition is going to be in French.
Right.
And I think it's something that a lot of people would be interested in the U.S. So we'll work on that.
Yeah, if any publishers are looking for a tax loss, it's a good place to come.
Yeah, really. Gosh. I mean, I think with the artistic projects that really have to be done, you think about money second. I said that to somebody the other day, somebody that I'm working on with an album with, and I just said, my approach is that you decide how you want to do it, and then you go get the money, instead of saying, this is how much money I have, and so we have to scale it to this.
Or this is what the money wants, so I'll do it so I can get the money.
Yes, there's that profit motive, which of course is so far from my reality that I don't even think about it. It'll be nice someday to make some money off my music, but hasn't really happened yet. Although I have to say that streams and downloads are going up slowly. There's a slow upward climb on my, my plays, which means I get income. I get tiny, cents on the dollar for every stream. But they actually send you a list of 50. Every 3 months or so, I'll get this long list of 50 places where my music was streamed or downloaded.
Wow.
And it's
that must be rewarding.
It's good. It's great.
Maybe not financially, but psychologically.
Well, it is, as I say, it's a slow upward climb, but I've been doing it for a long, long time. I think that the industry had to catch up with how to monetize things because of all the copyright issues and, pirating of music.
Yeah,
but it's gotten more organized now. As anything having to do with money will eventually get straightened out. So, yeah. Well, we've got just a little bit more time. Let's see. Yeah. Is there anything that you would like to talk about? Or ask me? Or, I don't know. And if you don't, that's fine, because I probably have a couple things on my list here we could talk about.
Well, yeah, probably you should do that. Because,
all right.
I mean, I've had a hard time. This, to me, is like sort of Facebook, and people say, well, I got up this morning and, I had breakfast, and there was a deer out the window, and now I'm going to go shopping. Whoopee.
What, you don't like pictures of what people had for dinner? Come on. What's wrong with you?
I saw a joke somewhere where the waiter says to the people, apparently you didn't like the meal, you didn't take any pictures of it.
Yeah. Yeah, that's one thing that I haven't stooped to yet. Although, occasionally when friends do it, I'm sort of half interested because we all like food.
I do it with my kids, with David, who's a cook. We trade good food photos.
That's different. That's different when somebody's a cook or you're really interested in cooking. But just, I had a friend who was posting every breakfast for months. But it brought him so much joy. And I have another friend who shoots his picture of his coffee every morning. And I swear, there's always people commenting. There's people, it's a gathering place. That's something that is very much missing from American culture, is the sort of community, what do you call it, the square.
Yeah, the meeting place.
Yeah, even though we have these town greens, they don't quite get utilized in the same way that, in other countries. But we do our best, right? We do our best.
Yes.
Okay, here's a question. When you look across your life, who have you stayed friends with and why?
Wow, that's an interesting question. Well, I have an old junior high school friend who is very wealthy and has an apartment in Paris, amongst other places. Comes to Paris once a year, and we see each other. But I think that's not so much friendship as it is just a connection to the past.
And proximity.
And proximity, because if he didn't come to Paris, we would never see each other.
Yeah.
Even when he comes to Paris, some years we don't see each other. Who else?
Yeah, like the small group of people who you really think of your core buddies.
Well, my core buddies are people, well, there's John and Joan, who I met in Ithaca, so that would be in the late 70s, early 80s. That's 35 years or something like that.
And what does that connect you to? What does that friendship connect you to?
That connects me to them.
Yeah.
There's nothing other than the relationship nothing other than, like, that's not enough. Than our relationship, our personal relationship with each other. Well, that's not true now that I think about it, because John and I met in the men's group, and that connects us, both of us, to our personal struggles, our personal attempts to come to grips with being a man in Western society in 2017 or whatever it is.
So you could make probably a deeper than average connection with somebody in a men's group, theoretically.
Well, if you go on the basis of stereotypes and previous assumptions and prejudices, which most of us do anyway, somebody in a men's group is more likely to be someone I'd be interested in than somebody I would meet in a bar somewhere.
But there's an expectation that you're going to open up and talk about things that are very personal.
Yes, this is true. Yes, you're right about that, Chris.
So that can create, I mean, if it's a good men's group and it's
Yeah.
successful, then it
This
can.
was very successful. We met every Wednesday for 4 years. It was amazing.
Wow.
Yeah.
Lucky you.
That's probably had, if you think of things as institutional events or as somehow or other a definable unit of something in your life, that probably had more influence on me than maybe anything else.
Gosh, that's a testament to
Yeah, it was quite
men's
a powerful
groups.
experience.
or groups of that type.
Yeah.
I mean, a book group can turn into something like that, at least with women. No, those could turn.
Guys don't get into book groups unless they're professors and they want to teach somebody something.
Yeah, I don't know.
So I don't know who else. Who do I have? I mean, there are people like yourself, and you're probably the closest person from the Markles gang.
It's just interesting to me how at least in my life, it's a very small number of people that really, through thick and thin,
Yeah.
they're there. They're like touchstones, and you can not see them for a while. You can go through huge events, but when you come back together, you feel just as comfortable talking about anything that's gone on, and they care, and
Yeah.
you don't hesitate to just open your heart.
Well, that's interesting because, in fact, when we come back to the States, I see several people like that, and of course, there are my two sons. And when we get together, Mary Renee will tell you about it in her broken English about how when the three of us get together, the rest of the world just disappears. I mean, it's impossible to get in. There are no cracks. There are no.
That sounds like
splits.
fun. That sounds
It's
great.
amazing. It's incredible. It's like magnets. Bang.
Was it always that way, or did it develop as they got older?
I think it's developed as we got older, especially since their mom died when she was only 47 years old. So the three of us, well, we didn't confront life together because I kind of abandoned my kids when I went to France. It's not the first time I abandoned them. In fact, they'll be happy to tell you about the abandoning experiences that they have had with their father. But we're pretty good friends.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it is awesome. It's amazing.
Wow. There's nothing like it. Well, I guess it's time to go.
Too bad.
That
It's
went
been fun.
fast, I
Yeah,
know.
it did go
I had a
very
feeling
fast.
we'd be able to talk
Jesus, I've been
forever.
waiting for this for 4 years, and it got over in 30 seconds.
Yeah, sorry. Anyway, you've all been listening to 11th Hour Radio. This is Kristina Stykos here with John Daitch. And thank you, John. Thanks for coming
welcome.
on. This was
You're
really,
welcome,
really
Chris.
fun.
Thanks for having me on the show.
I really enjoyed it.
I did too.
Yeah. So we
This
should.
goes down in the on the I don't know what.
Just another fun thing that we did.
Yeah, right. Peak experience.
Yeah. All right. So we'll be back next week, I believe.
Not me. I'll be.
Yeah,
elsewhere.
he'll be back in France or somewhere, but Emily will be back, and we'll see you then. Bye.
Twilight Zone, big trout roam. They lurk neath each nook, cranny, and stone. A mayfly blur in the closing light. Ripples abound in a swirl of enticing delight. Rise to the occasion, throw your atoms clear. Oh, parachute boom, you come to bear. None of thy fly. Dance, trout, dance. Hear the call of the double haul. Shoot to the fire pool. A subtle drop from an eastern sky. Dance, trout, dance. Honor thy fly. A perfect drop to a massive brown way with a Cahill he's headed down. Tip it tight, the ground's loaded for fight. Not a thy fly. Dance, trout, dance. Honor thy fly. Honor thy fly. Big spring thaw, caddis in the craw. Grab your muddler, your hare's ear nymph, and your woolly bugger. Then the spinner falls, it's a cascade of life and death. The pulse quickens as the trout plot thickens. Mend your line and mend your ways to the river's flow. Now trout all around, do-si-do. On it I'd fly. Dance, trout, dance. Hear the call of the double haul. Shoot to the fire pool. A subtle drop from a western sky. Dance, trout, dance. On it I'd fly. A perfect drop to a massive brown way with a Cahill headed down. Tip it tight, ground's loaded for fight. On it I'd fly. Dance, trout, dance. On it I fly. On it I fly.